Welcome to the National Teachers Hall of Fame webinar with the Class of 2022 inductees. My name is Ken Weaver and I will be the moderator of today's webinar and have the distinct honor of introducing to you these 5 outstanding teachers from across the nation. From my right to left, we have Sergio de Alba, 6th grade teacher at Miano Elementary in Los Baños, California, having taught 20 years. Bob Fenster, 10th through 12th grade history teacher, Hillsborough High School, Hillsborough, New York, having taught 29 years. Leila Kubesh, 8th through 12th grade TESOL, teaching of English as to speakers of other languages, and Spanish teacher from Norwood High School in Norwood, Ohio, 25 years teaching. Kareem Neal, 9th through 12th grade special education, Maryvale High School, Phoenix, Arizona, 23 years as a teacher. And Chris Poulos, 9th through 12th grade Spanish at Joel Barlow High School, Reading, Connecticut, with 21 years of teaching experience. So our distinguished panel will be asked questions. We will start with a different individual to be the first respondent, and we'll go ahead and get started. Sergio will get us started. Sergio, here's the question, and then, of course, all others will have an opportunity to respond. You have each been in the classroom for more than 2 decades, so there must be something that keeps you there. What do you find most rewarding about your teaching career?
Well, for me, it's the students. There's no other job in this world that can make a bigger difference than a teacher. And so knowing that every year that I continue to teach, I'm making a difference in the lives of the students that I serve, the community that I'm from, it inspires me to continue. And this is a very difficult job. But because of that, because of the change that I know that I have been able to make, it makes me want to continue to do this type of work.
Great, thank you. Bob?
I suspect we're going to get the same answer from everybody about that. Specifically, it's the students and the relationships that we are able to build. And I can't say it better than Sergio. I'll just add that as a high school teacher, I'm able to, in many ways, stay in touch better with my students as they graduate and follow their career trajectories and get to see whether they become educators themselves or lawyers, doctors, scientists, or anything really, ultimately becoming fully realized people, adults, active citizens. It's incredibly rewarding to play even just a small part in that.
Thank you.
For me, it's definitely the students, but also the relationship with their families. Visiting their homes, get a chance to see things that I did not know existed, and helps me serve as a voice for my students and their families to be able to make the change that they need.
Thank you. Kareem?
For me, it is the community that I've built in my classroom. So, obviously the students are the biggest part of that. But, my whole family's in New Jersey. I teach in Arizona. I live in Arizona. I'm no longer married or anything like that. So I live alone. And at school, it is like where I feel my family is. So like our classroom, it's room 421 Maryvale High. And we call it like our little family. And so paraprofessionals, my students, myself.
Very nice. Very nice. Chris?
There's 3 things that keep me going in education, and one, as we all have said, are the students. Students have changed a lot in 20 years, and it's fun to keep up and learn from them as they change about what's going on in our world and in our society and in their lives. The second reason I'm at the school where I started 21 years ago is because the teaching staff, the administration, and the community is a collaborative group of people, and we really all work together. It's a wonderful place to work, and they are, as Kareem said, a second family, my work family. Can depend on a lot of the people that I work with and the parents and families where I work. And the third thing is, as I've progressed through my teaching career, I've done some advocacy work with people who make decisions about education policy. And as I go through and think about what's going on, I realize that there's still a lot of work to be done in order for us to improve outcomes for all kids. And so that's something that, until I can feel good about saying I've left the profession a little bit better by expanding my impact beyond my students, beyond their community, but to the decision makers, the policy makers that make decisions about the profession, then I'll be ready to move out.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. So actually now we're going to move and have you, Chris, start the second question, and start responding to the second question. The second question is, what is the most pressing issue facing teachers today?
Well, I think that we were in Washington a month ago, as you may recall, and we met with members of Congress and we met with people at the U.S. Department of Education. And we've all talked to a number of educators in our role. And the theme that keeps coming back is that there is a shortage of teachers in our country. It's whether you're in Kansas or Connecticut or Washington, D.C., people are agreeing on this. And that we need to find ways to attract and retain the very best people into public education. And, you know, I mentioned before that kids have changed over time. I'm a Generation Xer. And now we have Gen Z, Gen Y, millennials, and these type of people that are entering our profession want opportunities to lead. They want opportunities to grow, and the education system is an egalitarian system. You're a teacher, then you can become a principal. But I think what we need to do to combat that problem of the shortage is to make teaching a profession of opportunity. To say to a teacher, as you develop skills, we have positions for you that allow you to remain in the classroom, but allow you to affect positive change within your teaching community. And so something like a career pathways model, I think, is one of the solutions that we're going to need to implement to attract the next generation of young people to join our profession.
Thank you. Corinne?
Because I know that most of us are going to talk about recruitment retention because it is dire, and for me, definitely the number one issue. I'd love to talk about how we need to kind of build these stronger school communities. I know I come back to communities a lot, but I think it's important because we're telling a lot of people who don't feel like a real part of schools, right? Like my students in self-contained have been traditionally thought of as other folks in schools. But you can break that down to most students, whether it be LGBTQ folks, Native American students, Black students, whatever it is, that they're not necessarily feeling parts of school community. Like school is not, quote unquote, for them. And we're asking those folks to come back and do it as a professional. And when I talk about that, when I talk about the retention part of it, and people talking like, what was it that got you in there? And I said, well, teachers took me under my wing because I was a quick learner as a young kid. And so I was kind of like that school pet type dude. And so teachers loved me and they brought me along. Whereas most of the people who grew up where I grew up, that wasn't their situation. And so they look at me like I'm crazy when I say, bro, being a teacher is amazing. They're like, I don't want to go back to that. It's like the scene of the crime for us. Right? And so we're saying we got to recruit. I hear people say, go to these HBCUs and recruit. So I was like, those people didn't feel like school was for them. So we got to structure school communities in a way that every person feels like a part of it. We got to figure out a way to do that.
Thank you. Layla?
One of the pressing issues that teachers see is high stress and burnout, and having to wear multiple hats. In addition to that, some schools and actually some states in Indiana, Ohio, there is no reciprocity. So if a teacher needs to move from one district even to another state, they need to start from the beginning. It makes it so youth in those communities would not be interested in looking at teaching as a profession.
Thank you. Bob?
The stress that teachers, whether they're new teachers or veteran teachers, face is unlike anything at this point in time that I've seen in my entire career. Maybe a heap load of more salary would make a difference for people to accept the idea that that so much more is expected of them. Whether we're talking about, dealing with the issues coming out of the pandemic, school shootings, or even just more generally the prescriptive way that we tell teachers what they have to do, the data crunching and the cookie cutter work that that's expected of them, and public acrimony, whether it's about the benefits that teachers get or telling teachers what they should or should not be teaching in the classroom instead of leaving that to educators. All of those things together make it very difficult for people to want to stay in the profession, whether they're veteran teachers or new teachers. We're in a crisis at this point, and we need to do something about it. And all of those things, I think, need attention.
Thank you, Bob. Sergio?
Along the same lines as Bob, support in innovation, support in individual creativity. Every single teacher has something that they can bring into the classroom that makes their process better. If you allow for that creativity, students are more engaged. The program that I have, for example, is very different than most teachers. But that individuality, that creativity that I bring into my classroom is because I'm passionate about how I teach. That reflects on how the students succeed. If you allow for that, and just like he said, these cookie cutter systems that we have, it ruins good teachers. It makes it so that good people don't want to become teachers. And that's sad, because it's one of the best professions in the world. So allowing that support for creativity, innovation. As a teacher, I'm trained to see what is needed. If you would allow me to do what I see is needed, students become more successful.
Thank you. Thank you. So moving to our third question, Kareem, you'll start us off. The third question is, we have seen a fairly large percentage of teachers leaving the profession. We just said, we talked about that, during their first 3 years of teaching, even before the pandemic struck. What factors cause early career teachers to leave the profession, and what can be done to reverse this trend?
So great question. So teachers have like a ton of work, as all the people in this panel know very well. Anybody who lives with the teacher, who knows the teacher, parents of my family know just from the stories from me. And you pretty much have to have an extra job when you start teaching. So when you first start teaching, your salary is low and you need another job, right? So you can take this as we need better salaries or we need less work, however you want to take it. But I had 3 jobs up until 7 years ago. So for 16 years of a teaching career, I had 3 jobs. And what it does, here goes how the effect is. It's not just the burnout, just how tired you are. So for me, that extra, we rarely can get all our planning done in the course of a school day, right? So a lot of times we do it either right after school before we want to drive home, or a lot of people, they're fine with taking it to their house, however it may be. But for me, I was going to my next job right after work, right? And then I would work that next job, come home, eat, take a shower, and go back to teach. And a lot of times what it meant was my lessons were a little less dynamic than they were these last 7 years when I had the time. So now I have the time and the inspiration. I can go to a museum, I can do, and it's like, oh wow, that would be cool for my students. We weren't doing that in the beginning of our careers. We were going to our next job. And that takes a toll on the person.
One way to reverse the trend of the teachers leaving, especially the early newcomers to education, is the support. A lot of teachers are expected to wear many hats. And I noticed a lot of them looked like me. When I began, I felt like I needed to know everything and work by myself. But as I began to collaborate with my colleagues and seek the support of parents and community leaders, and I realized I don't have to be the counselor, I don't have to be the parent. I need to be 100% teacher to my students, but I can bring others along with me by asking for help. And that's something we really don't know how to do, by teaching us the skill to say, you need to network and this is how it's done. So I think that's something that's really important for all teachers, no matter how long they've been in education, being able to ask for help.
When I started in the classroom, I had a lot of academic freedom to implement lesson plans the way I saw fit, and sometimes they didn't work. And I learned from that, and I made those adjustments. I've had student teachers come into my classroom with the most absurdly rigorous list of things that they have to do in every single class, putting the standards on the board, and things that I think are complete nonsense. Maybe for the most inept, inexperienced person that doesn't have a clue of what to do, it would be the right thing. But I think we need to let go and trust passionate teachers to actually be able to figure things out and not use the cookie cutter approach. And I think that many teachers, young teachers who have passion, have that squelched by being told this is how you have to do it, and then they think to themselves, well, I don't want to do this. And so I think we need to do more to trust teachers to innovate and make those adjustments on the fly.
Sergio.
And I kind of find it interesting, at least in my state, I've seen that the new teachers have a lot put on them, but they don't have any training to go along with it. And so we expect all this success from these new teachers, but no, once again, support. And it's just, I find that interesting. How do you want them to succeed and want to stay in the teaching profession when we make it so difficult? And so I would develop programs that would allow for these teachers to get the help that they need whenever they're struggling. I've been asked many times by my new teachers if they could come into my classroom, observe the way I do my classroom management, the way I teach the lessons. And we need more of that, more mentoring, more support for these new teachers that allow them to be wonderful teachers, great teachers, but we just don't give them a chance. So that's what I would do. I would create more mentoring programs, programs to help them understand what's needed, what is not needed, because there's a lot that's not needed, and just help them see that it's a beautiful job.
Thank you, Sergio. Chris?
Yeah, I think that young teachers and veteran teachers often get frustrated with new policies and mandates that are placed on them and that interfere with what their ideal of teaching is. And I mentioned before in the previous question about a need for advocacy in helping to influence lawmakers. And the way I see it is there is an implementation gap. So you have policymakers, they're good intentioned people. They don't want to cause harm. They're making decisions that affect the classroom, but they haven't been in the classroom for a long period of time. And at the same time, you have extraordinary teachers, better than any of us, teachers out there that are better than us, that don't understand the rationale and the need for an education policy. And so what we need to do is close that gap. We have to help the policymakers understand the implications of their decisions in the classroom, and we have to help the educators understand the need for policies or guidelines to govern a public education system. And so the way, and I think if we can do that, and there's more of a mutual understanding, we're going to help more kids, we're going to improve outcomes for more kids. The way I think we resolve that is we create opportunities where teachers and policymakers can sit around the same table and have a conversation in advance of a new mandate or a new initiative, so that the policies are informed by the practitioners. I think if we would do that, teachers would go to school feeling that they have agency, that they contributed to the decisions that govern their profession, and they would be proud to implement the instruction within the confines of those policies. And I think we keep more teachers if we do that.
Thank you. Thank you all. Excellent answers. Our next question, Layla, you'll get us started. Define the characteristics or traits of an effective principal or teacher leader.
Last year, I had the opportunity to give over 100 talks around, mostly in Ohio, but in many parts of the country. And one of the things that educators come to me and say, how did you get to do that? And they feel like their administrator does not support them to do new initiative. And I loved what Sergio said earlier about the support. So what does support look like from your boss, from your principal? I think the first way is when a teacher comes up with an idea and very excited about it. I would like to do this. And sometimes administrators, especially new ones, or maybe if the educator is new, they don't want to take a chance. And like the best thing you can do for us is take a chance on us. Let us fail, because then we would feel comfortable allowing our students to fail. We need to take risks, because everything I have done, when I look back at it, all these years in the past, I learned from my mistakes. And to me, I feel like it's a process of elimination. There is no failing. It's a process of elimination. You keep trying until it happens. And so really the greatest characteristic is a support by way saying, yes, go do that project. If you don't know how, I will connect you to a mentor.
Good. Thank you. Corey?
So for me, I think it is the way that they connect with their staff members and the students on campus. It seems like a job that's too big to do. When I teach at a school 3,000 kids, so maybe I'm coming from that personal lens, but it seems like a job that's so big. They got to deal with the community. You got their superintendents. There's a bunch of teachers. There's students. And so, we talked a lot, this panel talked a lot about like the value of connections in our classroom with students and things like that. I think it just helps them greatly in so many different ways. For instance, when they've connected with the staff shows them grace, and that just, it makes meetings go easy. It allows, them to feel like, oh, when the principal's coming into the classroom, which I think is essential, they don't feel stressed about that. They don't feel like they're being watched. They don't alter their teaching because of it. And all of those, you get the authentic version of a person when you connect to them. And so I think when they do that with their students, when they do that with their staff, they get the real versions of the people, and people feel free to kind of give of themselves, and we'll also go back to them.
I have two stories I'll share about effective principals. In 2011, I got invited to attend the International Summit on the Teaching Profession. It took place in New York City. There were a number of teachers from across the United States, and even more interesting, there were a number of teachers from across the world, and all of the education chiefs from those different countries. And it was very interesting to learn about what was going on in South Korea and Singapore and in Hong Kong and in different places. So I came back from that over the weekend, and it was Monday morning at my door. My principal came by, and he said, "Tell me about the International Summit." So we started talking somewhat superficially, because I was looking at my watch saying, well, I kind of got to get in and teach first period. And he said, "Oh, okay," and he left. At the end of the first period, though, I checked my email, and there was a meeting invitation for later on in the day. And when I went down to his office, the most senior teacher in our school was there. And he said, "I want you to talk to this senior teacher a little bit about more what we started." And we had this wonderful conversation. And towards the end of the period, professional development came up. He said, "Well, it's unfortunate, but we're out of time." I said, "Well, I don't think we're out of time. I think we need to continue talking about this." And he said, "Okay, well, let's meet next Friday, and each of you bring another teacher." And we had these ongoing Friday conversations for the rest of the year, where we talked about critical issues facing our school and our district and our students, and he listened. And he tried to respond in his actions as a principal to what his teachers thought were necessary. That was very effective. And teachers, every week we would invite another person. We ended up with a big room of people, and the teachers felt that they were validated. The second story is of a different principal. And I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Mark Brackett from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I was learning a little bit about his work around social and emotional learning. And he said, "Why don't you come with your principal and meet me down at the center, and we'll have a conversation about how you might implement this at your school." So my principal came with me. I invited her. We went to this meeting, and he said, "We should really train a team of your teachers in what we do. It costs a lot of money, though, $12,000, I think. We just didn't have the money." So we left, and I was kind of, this isn't going to go anywhere. And she said, "Chris, let's figure this out." So together with my principal, we wrote grants. We had to get it from different sources, but we acquired enough money to train a team of 8 people, 2 administrators, 6 teachers. We went to the training. We came back the next year and we implemented a social and emotional learning pilot that produced data that we later presented to the staff that validated a district-wide initiative in social and emotional learning. It was a top-down supported, bottom-up led initiative. And at no point did the principal try to say, I'm in charge of this. She's like, this is the team. This is a team led by teachers. And it's what made the initiative take root in our district, because teachers said that they felt a trust in the fact that the information initiative was being presented by fellow teachers and supported by administrators. That's another extraordinary trait of a leader to give that leadership to her teachers.
Thank you. Sergio?
An effective leader understands that every teacher has value and is able to pull that out and create a better program. And so when the focus is not how does my staff make me look good, it makes a big difference. When the focus is, I know that Bob is good at this, Layla's good at that, how can I use their gifts, because they are gifts, to improve my site? Our site, I should say. That's an effective leader, because you inspire everybody to do their best and to pull out their gifts to support the whole school. Now, if you can do that, you can make a big difference in how successful your site is. Everybody's happier, you look good as an administrator, and that should be the focus. Pulling out the values, the gifts that each teacher has. That's an effective leader.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll be brief, but I'm going to try to tie it together with where Layla started. I once had a letter of recommendation from a former principal who said that, and I could feel this, he said that every time I came and knocked on his door, he felt a little anxiety because he knew I was going to ask him to do something or ask him for permission to do something. But in the letter he said, but I always knew at the end of the day it would be something good for the students. And so recognizing what the talents of your staff are and their intentions, I think is really important. And frankly, every administrator needs to remember they're not in the classroom anymore, even if they once were. They have to maintain communication with teachers to understand what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you. Bob, you'll lead us off on this next question. What have we as educators learned from the pandemic that will help us transform teaching and learning?
The pandemic, of course, presented us all with incredible challenges. And unfortunately, I think we are still suffering, and many of our students are suffering tremendously as a result of it. So I like the formulation of the question in terms of trying to make it a positive. And I think the way that I would say this is that I think for me and for I think quite a few veteran teachers that I know, although it was not a challenge that we wanted, having to figure out how to take the curriculum that we had and teach it in a highly compressed time period. We would meet instead of 5 days a week. We would meet with our individual classes 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the week, for a shorter period of time. And making those classes effective forced me, I'll speak for myself, forced me to basically really concentrate on what were the most important things. And now that we're back in essentially a regular and mostly normal environment, it's allowed me to start reinventing, to take the lesson to say, well, I trimmed that out for a reason. Maybe there's something else I can do with my students. So and I think a lot of teachers recognized, although it was incredibly stressful, the benefits that could come from that. We could actually have teachers become reinvigorated if we can take out some of the other stressors for them to reimagine their curricula or their lesson plans instead of just necessarily, in some cases out of necessity, pulling out last year's lesson plan and doing it again.
Thank you. Layla?
What I have learned during the pandemic is that all the technology in the world can be useless at times, because there were times when my students did not have Wi-Fi. Some students, not all of them had Chromebook, but some kids didn't even have electricity. And for me, I learned the power of connection and relationships, visiting the students, or making a phone call. So we had to be flexible, because if we count on one thing when it comes to technology, it might not be there. So we really need to think a different way. What's another way that I can continue the relationship and that connection with my students and everyone?
For me, it was connecting, or expanding your classroom community to include the parents. It sounds like people like Layla do a great job of that, like you're visiting and all that stuff. But for me, it was, when I think about when I started teaching, 24 years ago, you had to call after school, right? And calling everybody after school wasn't going to work, because we already talked about the long hours you were putting in and things like that. Sometimes, I was going to a job, so maybe I could call one parent a day. And it was pretty tricky to kind of expand that community. And then, of course, COVID time happened, and the initial thing was a scramble to connect. But for me, particularly because I teach a self-contained class, even though it's high school, it was essential. So it was this importance that was put on having to connect to parents and being able to do it in a different way. That, one, made it easier to do, but two, made me realize, man, that was essential the whole time. It was just something that maybe we couldn't get to as easy, or we couldn't get to just because of how the technology was at the time or whatever. But I think a lot of people form those kinds of relationships for the first time and realize how much of a help it is to the students in their classroom. So I think the connection with everything.
Thank you. Chris?
The scariest thing of the pandemic was watching the levels of student disengagement increase. I remember an afternoon when we were full remote, and I started a class, and by the middle of the class, my face was the only one visible on the Zoom, and there were 20-something other blanked out spots. And we started to learn, right? We didn't realize the impact. We started to learn about the levels of anxiety, the levels of depression, the levels of what the isolation was doing to our students. And so we responded. Just like in the first months of the pandemic, we figured out how to patch the technology together. We said, we got to help these kids socially, emotionally, academically as they develop through this pandemic. And so one of the things we did was we slowed the pace down. We moved from an 8-period day to a 4-period block that gave kids half the homework every night. They were online doing work, and then they had to do homework. We figured out we have to slow that amount of work down. They don't have the steam to continue into the evening. We learned to be flexible with deadlines, and we learned to collaborate interdisciplinarily so that we could coordinate with other teachers to make sure to talk about kids' emotional health, but also to talk about what assignments we had on our calendar and how to make sure that we weren't overwhelming kids. And when we came back in person, we made sure to have time, advisory sessions, where we could touch base with students, we could connect with them in a non-academic environment, make sure things were going well. And I'm proud to say that I think it worked. I know it worked. And we still have a lot more work to be done. But I mentioned the social and emotional learning initiative in the last question. And in a way, before the pandemic, social and emotional learning was transactional. People somehow put it into their curriculum and they kind of checked it off as they did it. But the pandemic has forced us to weave it into the culture of what we do in our classrooms, to always have that filter of, are we making sure we're addressing the social and emotional needs of our students? I think that's a positive. Teachers have a new outlook on how to manage their classrooms. It's not just academic.
Sergio?
I think the pandemic allowed people to see just how incredible teachers truly are. We had to adjust quickly. It was a month before we had to get a completely new program, new approach. And our teachers were able to come in, figure out what they could do with what they had, innovate once again, and create a program that still allowed students to learn. And so it just shows how much we could each bring if we're allowed that opportunity. A lot of the things that we did during the pandemic, I think we can continue. It forced us to see education a little bit differently. And if we can continue to do what we did during that time and get that freedom to innovate, we can continue to improve. I think that's one of the things that the silver lining of the pandemic was that administrators kind of were a little bit more hands-off, at least in my district, and allowed us to decide what was best for our students.
Thank you. Thank you. All just wonderful answers. Sergio, we'll start with this question with you. How do you model respect for your students, and how do you get your students to demonstrate respect for all students in your school?
It's an interesting question because that's what I'm known for most in my school. That in the gardens, but you get respect when you give respect, and I teach my students that they deserve as much respect as I deserve. And so, from the first day of school, I talk to them first of all that we are a family. I think that's a common trait with this group, that we are a family and we are going to love each other. We're going to treat each other with the respect that we all deserve. And throughout the year, on a weekly basis, we have discussions. In the beginning, sometimes people thought maybe he's taking too much time just chatting. It's not about chats. It's these talks that allow them to see that learning is not just about what's in the books. It's learning to be a good community member. And so that's what my program is based on. It's respect. Respect to each other, respect to the process of learning, and respect to their future. And so it's incorporated into everything that I do. And everybody knows that they take care of each other too. So if they do something that's inappropriate outside of my classroom, they let them know as well, because they're brothers and sisters. They're like a family. And it's a beautiful thing.
I take a different approach. I teach high school, older kids, and I think it's important that we all be respectful for one another. I don't worry about, I don't care if they like each other at the end of the day. They don't have to feel that they're a family, but they do have to be respectful of one another. Dialogue is a huge part of what we do, especially in my AP government class, where we're talking about political issues where discussions can get heated. And so, specifically, there's rules and guidelines about what they're allowed to say, or what the types of behaviors that they're allowed to engage in. And I impress upon them that if they can't listen respectfully and can't understand the perspective of another person, even if they don't agree with it, they stand no chance of ever having any kind of constructive civil dialogue. Civility is critically important. That doesn't mean one can't get angry or passionate about a particular issue, but they need to basically be able to talk to one another rather than waiting to talk. Listen to one another rather than waiting to talk. And over the last few years, I think in particular in the political environment we've had, it's been super important. There's always going to be, in that kind of an environment, a few students who are frustrated that their view is not the dominant one in a classroom. But I'd like to think that all of them felt that they had the opportunity to speak their minds, to be heard, and given a fair shot.
I also take a different approach. Sometimes I model it at the beginning of the school year. I take a lot of photos of them. And then if they don't like a photo, I will not display it. I will stay after school and I will retake. I also honor requests, no matter how small or big it is. Like one student who said he wanted to do wish he knew his way around the kitchen, and we started doing the cooking show and tell after school, and a lot of other students wanted to do that. But also in the middle of the year, like for me, because they're much older, middle and high school, I can't tell them, well, we need to be respectful. Because sometimes talking doesn't make a change. And for me, I don't share the culture of any of my students. And last year when we came back, we were the only district in the state that we did it in person, not we didn't have it remote. And I noticed students were scared and they made a derogatory comment where they blamed the Asian community for the pandemic. I didn't say anything. I needed some time to think about what is best way. And when we did the cooking show, I contacted P&G and I asked for Asian community members to come and be the guests for the cooking show. And it was amazing to see the change. My students, even the Hispanic, go, wow, Chinese people are so nice. They are the nicest people. And quickly that went throughout the community. So for me, I really believe there's power in connecting students with diverse people on something that they need to show them, look at all these diverse people. They have their own gifts. They have their own talents. So they can also teach you a lot of things that you really need to do. So using the vehicle of the service learning or any project we do, and then being able to have this, what I call inclusive communication skills or intercultural communication skills. So a lot of people say we need to be kind. Well, what does kindness look like? And it begins with how we communicate with people or how we communicate about people. And so I incorporate that in no matter what language, whether it's French or Spanish or Japanese or ESL, there are ways of connecting that. Because really, as a foreign language teacher, it's like I'm teaching communication skills. And it's not about teaching you just words in a different language. It's about, at the end of the day, how to connect with people who are different from you and for you to respect all the diversity of perspectives.
I use community building circles in my classroom and with my club. So in my classroom, both myself contain students and my club, which is gen ed students. I became a restorative justice trainer about 6-7 years ago, and realizing that kind of the value of community building, which you'll hear me talk about a lot, but also being seen, heard, and feeling respected comes from that. So in the circle, everybody can see each other. Everyone sits on the same level. Everyone has that way of talking by using the talking piece. And it just becomes a thing that we do it once a week, we do it weekly. And it becomes kind of a way of being by the end. It's like, that when someone's talking, you're a listener. That, right? It seems like this simple concept because it kind of is. But what it winds up doing is, one, connecting everybody, which makes it easy for you to respect people. It is not as easy to respect someone from far away, right? When I see someone who grew up the exact opposite way as I did, they're different religion, different culture, maybe they're LGBTQ, and I'm not, it becomes very easy to not be as respectful as I could be. But once you have kind of eliminated those barriers, eliminated those things that we may cause bias implicitly, it becomes very easy to be respectful. But everyone has to practice that in a way, somehow, right? And like some people said, you can't just tell someone to be respectful. What does kind look like and all of that stuff. But I believe in that practice. And I believe in having restorative conversations too, but that's a whole different thing that would take us way too much time. But community building circles for me.
I think that at least my approach is when I meet a new class of students, it's important to A, be kind, B, have fair expectations, acknowledge the challenges that students nowadays face, and let them know you care. And so there's a few ways recently that I've tried to act. I could think that, but how I put that into action. One thing I did this year was, first day of school, I asked my students, I handed out a blank envelope. I said, write your name and address on the envelope. Now, first of all, it was interesting because most of them didn't know how to address an envelope because they don't communicate that way. So I put up an example on the smartboard, but they wrote their names and address on it, and I put them in piles by class. And every day, I tried to find a student that did something that was worth writing home to the parents about. And I would write to the parents of, and I'd write a note inside, and I'd send a letter home. Now, and I started with some of the kids that looked to have behavioral challenges or that they might be struggling, I'd send that note home. And it was amazing, and I got through every student by early February. It was amazing to see, and I can only imagine, like a lot of parents would write me back and say, thank you so much for the note. But if a parent gets the note at home and they're sitting down at the dinner table and they say, your teacher wrote this nice thing about you, it immediately lets the kids know that this guy's looking out for me. He cares. And it made a world of a difference. In fact, no Fs. Few low Ds, but no Fs. Everybody passed this year in my classes. And I think that might have contributed to showing them that I care. They would come back and therefore be respectful. The other thing I did that was kind of fun, and it started during the pandemic, was I created the Poolist playlist. So I created a Google Classroom class, and every week I would post a song. And I let them know. I said, your parents probably will like this music more than you. But with every song, I'd make a 1-minute video. And I'd talk about why I picked that song. And I'd typically try to tie it to some sort of lesson that would help them understand like a challenge. So during a tight week of testing or exams, I would put up David Bowie's Under Pressure song, and I talk a little bit why I like the song, and that it's okay to have pressure, and this is how you deal with it. And it created kind of an online culture, and the students would come in and say, wow, you really understand some of the challenges we have in school, and it was through music. And I'd say I got a few kids to listen to some older music that they weren't used to. But just by, I guess, relationships is probably the overall umbrella of these few examples I'm highlighting. But kids come back when they feel that they've been heard, that you're praising them, and by nature, they are respectful.
Thank you. All right, so we have about 13 minutes left, so we've got plenty of time for our final question. And Chris, we're going to start with you. What suggestions do you have for universities and other teacher preparation programs that will assist them in recruiting and preparing pre-K through 12 teachers for the challenges that lie ahead?
Well, I think that universities need to communicate that teaching is an admirable profession, but a hard profession. And it requires a lot of work and input, but the rewards upfront teaching outweigh the hard work and so they should highlight, universities should highlight the opportunities that teachers have. They should put prospective teachers in front of other teachers and hear from those other teachers that have had positive experiences. I know when I trained as an administrator, and I never took that path, but in those first series of classes, they put seasoned administrators in front of us. And I remember looking at them and listening to them and just being in awe. Like it was such a positive conversation and very motivating. I would do the same thing for teachers. And I didn't talk to many teachers when I was getting trained to become a teacher. So I think that's important. Also, I think that the sooner you can get prospective teachers in a classroom with kids, the better. And so maybe it's a practicum, not student teaching, but an opportunity for students to visit classrooms at different levels, maybe not that frequently. They would be able to observe all of the good things that we take from teaching, and I think it'd be motivating.
Great.
Several things. So one, I would tell them in the way they're finding students, it would be great if the communities near, where I teach or where, people teach, if they were kind of truly recruited to be there. Like in my school, our teaching population looks like the world's teaching population. 80% women, 20% men, and it's, probably 60% white and whatever. And that is not the neighborhood where I teach or anything like that. And you know, we have a university that's close, and it's like, you know, what are you doing to outreach in those communities to get them into your schools? I know that, you know, every university wants as many students as possible there, but it would be nice if they could be discerning that way for their teacher colleges and say, hey, get in the neighborhoods and talk to the people there to go back into their neighborhoods. It is powerful. I believe there's a teacher or two in this panel that is teaching in a neighborhood. I am not, but it is a powerful thing. I wish I could teach in the neighborhood I grew up in. Right now I can't, but I wish I could. The second thing is kind of like Chris said, it would be nice. Like I had one university in Arizona, Northern Arizona, they had me at AU. They had me come speak at their graduation, which was, you know, scary because it was like 14,000 people. And then I was like, hello. I was like, oh no. But, you know, and they were the ones who gave me the honorary doctorate. We were just talking about that. And, you know, I spoke there. And then afterwards, they had like a kind of like a mini banquet, and people who wanted to could come meet me and talk about the whole situation they did. And, you know, so many of the, of course, prospective teachers came and talked to me. But also there was like, you know, siblings, younger brothers and sisters who were just like, man, like if I had teachers like you, and I was like, teachers like me are everywhere. You never hear from them. No, you know, you see the strike or you see something like that, and that becomes teachers are what you hear on whatever news channel you like to listen to. So, you know, getting teachers out there who are passionate about their work in front of them too. But I love neighborhood outreach.
For me, as a new teacher, I wished I had the social skills. You know, there was a lot of focus on my college studies on cultural studies. So I learned a lot of cultures, but I didn't know how to use it. You know, as a teacher, parents would come to me, but when the parents did not come for parent-teacher conference, like, oh, I didn't know what to do other than maybe sending a note or making a phone call. I did not know until later on when I became involved in board and different community leadership roles that, oh, I can reach out to them. So really, I think candidates need to learn networking skills, communication skills, outreach, and then also to connect with each other, that creating a very strong cohort so they can build, they can help each other. Like for me now, if I need something about technology, I can connect to my colleagues. And for a long time, I did not know that it's okay for me to ask for help, or I didn't know who I can go to. So definitely being able to ask for help and saying I need something, I need help, and whether it's a faculty, if I need a letter of recommendation to be able to do something, if my principal is new and does not know me. But definitely it's really, otherwise I feel like education is becoming disconnected, and it started to feel lonely, especially during the pandemic.
I think the problem or the issue is a problem because it's so much more than just trying to recruit young people for the profession. They're not blind. They see how people are frustrated with teachers and how teachers themselves are frustrated. I remember when I started as a teacher in 1993, that one of my mentor's first pieces of advice was stay out of the faculty room, and that you're gonna meet the people who hang out there are embittered and angry and frustrated. So it's not like that has particularly changed. I offer that same advice as well, except we don't have a faculty room anymore. They got rid of it. So for other reasons, but I think that we culturally have to do more to celebrate teachers, and I know this is low-hanging fruit, but I mean I think we need to celebrate teachers like with the National Teacher Hall of Fame. They should bring in, as previous people on the panel suggested, bring in veteran teachers whose stories, who are not burned out, who still love the profession, and who can, and even if they don't bring them in individually, you can read stories and share the impact that good teachers have, and that's the aspiration that people, kids who want to grow up to play in the NBA or the NFL don't think about being the third string quarterback or kicker. They want to be the star. So let's try to find the stories that are inspirational and give them something to aspire to. But then at the same time, I'll go back to my earliest comments. We need to stop basically telling people that there's only one way to be a good teacher, and that you have to follow these prescribed things. We have to double down on the idea that people are creative and innovative, and give them the opportunity to fail before they learn how to succeed. I think that's a huge part of this.
Kids always say, he took mine. I say that. But kind of along the line of getting people that represent that community to teach that community. Research shows that if you get a teacher that looks like the students, they're more successful right off the bat. And so promoting that idea that let's hire let's try to get these cultures, these people to come into the profession because of the difference they can make. That's why I'm still here. Yeah, I'm a very talented person. I could be doing something else, making more money. But I decided to do this because of how it makes me feel, knowing these kids are coming back, some of them in their 30s, telling me, you made a big difference in my life. And so new teachers need to realize that we have that opportunity. We can make a difference in not just our community, but in the world. They need to know that. But the struggle is that those first 3 years, at least where I'm from, they have so many hoops to jump through just to get that credential. And so I know other states are a little bit easier, but it's tough because I see those new teachers. I try to mentor them as much as I can. And like I said before, that's an important component to a successful program. Having experienced teachers help you understand what needs to be done and what doesn't, so you don't burn out. I've seen teachers 2 years after they began, I can't do it. And a lot of these teachers would have been great. We just don't have that support that they need to get to that point where they get over that hurdle and are able to see, that they can make a big difference.
Thank you. The moderator misread his watch, and so we do have time for one more question. So anyway, and Kareem, we'll start with you. What do you plan to do now that you are a member of the Hall of Fame, the National Teachers Hall of Fame, so you are a Hall of Famer, with the challenge of being an ambassador for education to elevate the level of respect for the profession?
So, I've been, it's been what, 2 months now? It feels like it's been longer since, I was told that I was one of the 5, and since then, the phone's been ringing and emails have been coming. And, having an honor put on you that's so heavy, you feel, I would hope everybody feels this way, but I feel a responsibility to just always be like really solid, even when I'm tired, right? To just, if I'm talking about education, it is with the passion that I have when I'm in my classroom. Because that's what's a little tricky for, I think, folks like us. You put us in a room full of students to teach them, and it is, we shine. It is the thing we've done. Just me thinking about my students, puts me in a certain mind frame. And that's not always the case when some person is interviewing you. And so trying to find that is what I've been doing. And, I have been fortunate and, getting a couple big awards over the last few years. And just not all, sometimes you're tired, teaching's still a tough job, right? And, making sure that I say that this is about students in classrooms all over the country, as opposed to just my classroom, right? So every time someone asks me a question, to say, give it all you got, give it that passion that you have in your room for these questions, because it does still spill out into the students in classrooms all over the country.
Last year I gave, like I said, over 100 talks, and at the end of each talk, a lot of those teachers said, I had some teacher came to me and said, I was going to quit, and now you shared with me a new way of thinking, a different mindset, and it makes me want to keep doing this. Really I made myself available to any school, anywhere. I said, let me know and I will be there. It can be in person or in Zoom, so I can share the skills and I can share how I did it. And I know that self-care sometimes feels like a buzzword, but there's ways that you have to elevate yourself because you can't give what you don't have.
Well, we aren't actually being inducted for another 2 days, so there's still a chance that something could happen. I might misstep or something, but in a way, I don't think I'll change a thing. I work as hard as I humanly can. We were talking before about, Kareem early on was talking about the number of hours we work, and 12 to 16 hour days are normal for me, and I said earlier today as well that I think I have about 4 years left in the classroom, and I can hear the clock ticking. And I'm not going to wait. I'm not leaving anything behind. I'm going to give everything I have. But now with this moniker or this title that I have, certainly, I hope that it opens some doors and gives me some opportunities to have audiences that might not otherwise have given me much attention. So I'm certainly going to do what I can to pass on ideas about student agency and choice, representation in the classroom, the things that drive me, that motivate me, I'm going to be talking about them until I retire, and then of course beyond that in phase 2 of whatever education-related field I have once I'm outside the classroom.
Sergio?
I only have 17 years left.
Oh my God! The clock is ticking.
The clock is ticking. I feel it. But I don't think I'm going to change either, because that's what I've been doing since I earned a little bit of respect in the first couple of years of success. And so I'm going to continue to hopefully inspire others to become teachers. I have many students, past students, that became teachers because of what they experienced with my class, that I was the only teacher that thought that they could do something with their lives. And so I'm hoping that I can still continue to inspire other teachers and or other people to continue in this profession. So I'm going to continue to do what I do, and this just adds a little extra oomph to my message.
Thank you.
So 3 points. I think that with this honor comes a responsibility. And that responsibility to me means, for one, trying to keep up with my students and how they're changing. And they're very different than they were 21 years ago when I started teaching. And I think it's important. It doesn't matter where I am in my career, I have to be in the know and keep up with them and their needs, and to always put students first. And I think that as Hall of Fame inductees, we have to model that for the people with whom we work. The second thing is, for the last 15 years, I've spent quite a bit of time in trying to engage teachers as advocates for best practices and policies. And that's something that I think is more critical now than ever to continue to do. And so I believe a teacher has that role in the school with their students, but they also have a role to give back to their profession. And I will continue to try to find ways and venues to engage my colleagues and to be a part of that engagement on what is best in terms of teaching practice and the education policy that governs it. And third is on the policy side of things. 3 weeks after the announcement that I was going to be inducted to the National Teacher Hall of Fame, I announced my candidacy for state legislature. And I feel that when I win, that I will be the voice of educators amongst a new peer group of policymakers. And I hope to really leverage my experiences that I'm gaining through this award, and the experiences of my career as someone who can close that implementation gap and really make an impact on how people develop laws and policies that govern what we do every day in our classrooms. And I believe if we can do that, we will improve outcomes for all kids and we will allow them to live the lives they dream.
So as we conclude our session today, we're going to go through one more time. Any other comments that you want to make or emphasize that you've made today? We have essentially an international audience here. What if you have something that you want to say but have not yet had a chance to say, this is a good opportunity to do that. But also too, if there are some key points that you want to reiterate, it's okay to do that. All right, Sergio, we'll start with you.
You know, I was a little nervous when I found out that we were going to do this. But like I tell my students, every experience makes you better. So I'm actually thankful for this experience because I really do not like to talk in front of other people. And so
We would never know that. We would never know that.
other than that, I don't have anything else I want to share, but I'm very thankful, appreciative of this recognition. And it's been a wonderful experience.
And I'll just triple down on what I've been saying is I think students learn best by doing, not by being told. And I think teachers learn that way as well. And I think that to me that is the best salve for what ails us is get the deadening hand of bureaucracy and administration off of the backs of teachers. Their morale will improve and the quality of teaching will improve. But I'll also add that I'm also grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was wonderful. I enjoyed being here, and to me, it's really a special treat because first time I came to the U.S., I was 17. I was in Kansas, and I couldn't speak English and feel like, oh no, I'm nervous. I'll be doing this in English, but it was wonderful. And maybe at some point, the audience can track us down and ask us questions if something comes up.
I'd say build stronger school communities if you can, if you're a politician, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher. There's kids out there who you're not thinking about in your schools. And a lot of times it's the self-contained kids, so of course I'm gonna fight for those students. But sometimes it's the LGBTQ folks, it's the Native American folks, whatever it is. Make sure people really aren't being left out of the community. Once it becomes whole, it feels better for all involved, and that is part of lifting up education.
I said it before, but we need to be kind, have fair expectations, and let students know we care. I think that's critical in education. I want to thank the Hall of Fame for all of the opportunities you've provided for us. And the most special is getting to know the other inductees. Just in our conversations in Washington and here in Kansas, I've learned so much from all of you. It's a gift, and I'm grateful for that.
To the audience, thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your schedules, out of your life to spend time. Truly, as you have heard and seen, we are in the midst of giants in the classroom. These Hall of Famers are just exceptional in every way. And as you heard them mention frequently, there are many, many teachers out there that are even better than they. So I think if I had to have a takeaway message, it's as always to have that optimism and the confidence that the children across our nation are being well cared for and nurtured in all ways, social, emotional, cognitive, physical, social, to become contributing adults in our society. So please join me in thanking these outstanding educators, these outstanding teachers, and with that, we will say